Right, so you always want to start obviously with a baked cake. So you're gonna bake your cake. What I do is I bake them in you're gonna do whatever size you want to do, but I am baking today 6" by 3" cakes. So I use 3" cake pans. You can use 2" cake pans if you want. These are just a little bit better because your cakes will be able to rise a little bit more. Typically I put in, obviously it's gonna matter what size cake you're doing, but for 6" you do about 2 cups of cake batter for the 6" cake. Now, I just got these out of the oven, so you're gonna get them out of the oven and let them sit for 5 minutes before you cut them, and you're gonna get them out of the pan. Now, when I bake my cake, I put in a cut piece of parchment at the bottom, so then that way the cakes don't stick, and then I use baking spray, specific baking spray. So you can use Pam baking or another kind of baking, as long as it has flour in it. Now, if you're gluten-free, you can use a gluten-free baking spray as well. That's totally fine. But if you are not gluten intolerant, I would recommend using Pam baking or another baking spray. So that way you don't have to flour the pan. Nice little shortcut. So from here, we're going to cut the tops off the cakes. Now, the reason why we're cutting them when they just came out of the oven is we want to keep that moisture inside the cake. Now, the steam leaving the cake is going to be moisture leaving the cake, and you want to trap that in. And the way to do that is we have to wrap them in our press and seal. So we're going to cut off the tops of our cakes. Now, I use this wonderful serrated knife. This is Fat Daddy-O's. So you always want to use a serrated knife when you're doing this. We're going to cut the tops off. And then what we're going to do is cut these in half. So you're going to just cut them in half. Now, you might have they make special ones for people to help, like little knife cutter things to help if you don't know how to cut straight. You don't necessarily have to have one of those. You can just kind of eyeball it. I just try to stay in a nice straight line and saw back and forth. Then what we're gonna do is add parchment in between. So I have the same size cake as I have parchment. So these are 6" size parchment squares. So you're just going to lift those up onto the parchment. Grab the 2 corners and set your cakes on top. Okay, so from there you want to get wiggle these back. Get the press and seal. And then you'll lay that press and seal out. And the bottom of your cakes will be cool now, so you'll just be able to lift them up from here and set them onto your press and seal. So make sure you have that parchment in between all those layers. Now we're going to wrap this like a nice little present, a delicious cake present. And fold in those little sides, and then you're gonna turn it, just a little half turn. Grab some more press and seal. You always wanna wrap this in a double layer of press and seal. Now, you can bake your cake a day before, a week before, a month before, a year before. As long as you have it wrapped correctly, it will be good in the freezer for up to a year. So, depending on what time frame you need, if you need to bake it days before, that's okay. As long as you have it in the double wrap of press and seal, it'll be great in the freezer because you're locking in all of that moisture because it's still warm, and it'll be nice and soft when you unwrap it. And then we'll take it to the freezer. Okay, so now we're going to build our cake. And we're going to be starting off with our frozen cake, which we have cut and put into the freezer. Now you wanna make sure that it is frozen overnight. So you have to bake it at least the day before at a minimum. So we're going to start with our frozen cake. You wanna kinda hit the top to get the ice crystals off of it. The ice crystals are what we want because that is that moisture that we trapped into the cake when we cut it and wrapped it when it was still warm. So we're gonna unwrap this. Look at that yummy present. So we still have ice crystals on it, and what you're going to do is kind of pull that up so it separates off of the parchment, and you can see that it has that ice still on it, so we want to leave that on there. You're going to have your bag. This is a 24" bag, and it's 5 cups of buttercream. It's going to take 5 cups of buttercream to ice your specific 6" cake. Now, if you need more than 5 cups, it's always great to make more and have it extra than not have enough. So I always recommend making at least 6 cups of buttercream. And if you have extra, that's awesome. How you're holding your bag is you're gonna have your hand like this in almost an L shape. You're going to stick the bag like this. You're gonna have a mini piping bag in your palm each time. Now this can be right-handed or left-handed depending on your dominant hand. You're gonna have the bag resting on your arm. You can also side boob it. I like to do that too. Kind of hold it in the place. What you're gonna do is you're going to strangle this. You want all your fingers on the top of the bag. You don't wanna be holding it like a pencil, and you don't wanna be gripping it like bear claw. This is how we cut vegetables. That's not how we pipe, because you will pop a hole in your bag. If you pop a hole in your bag, not the end of the world. You can always use electrical tape to tape up the hole in your bag. So what you're going to do is you're going to squeeze a nice dollop of buttercream on your cake board. You'll set that buttercream aside. You'll take that first layer of cake. Now you can see this is the top of the cake where I cut the round dome off. And you're going to always want the middle of the cake up. So you're going to flip it like this. And make sure it's centered on your cake board and push it down. Now we're going to build our dam. So you're going to have your cake bag in your hand. And now this is for right-handed, but if you're left-handed, you're just gonna switch. It's going to be the opposite, left, right, and so on. So you're going to have your bag kind of tipped in left, towards the left side. You're gonna be in the front left corner of your cake, around 8 o'clock. You're gonna start piping. You wanna make sure you're lifting up and away from that cake. This is gonna be the dam that holds the filling. So you want to make sure that this is tall. If it's not, if we didn't have a dam and we just put the filling in, it would just slide around all over the place and be a giant disaster. So now we're gonna get our filling. I have a jelly, it's a cake filling, it's raspberry. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna start in the middle and do a tight spiral. Now I start the tight spiral and then I will start turning my turntable clockwise. If you're left-handed, it'll be counterclockwise. You're just going to stay on one side and turn the turntable. You're gonna fill it all the way to the dam. It's gonna look like this. Now, if you don't totally get the filling covering your entire cake, that's okay. So you're gonna get your black spatula. You're gonna hold it between your thumb and your middle finger with your pointer finger on that rest right here. This is our little offset spatula. You're going to use just the tip of the spatula. You don't want to use the whole flat. You don't want it to be flat like this. You want to have it tipped up. You're just going to use just the tip of the spatula to make sure that your cake is covered. Mine was pretty good, so I don't need to do a lot. So then you always want to have like a nice little bowl over here to set your stuff on, and some paper towels. I always pull off 10 paper towels and set it on my side, so then that way I have somewhere to wipe and put things down. Now you're going to get your next layer of cake. You're gonna pull that parchment up and pull it off of your cake. And you'll see this is the bottom of the cake and this is the middle. You always want the middle up, so you're gonna put the bottom down. Now, if you didn't cut perfectly straight, this is where we're going to fix it. So if you have a point where it's higher than the other side is lower, you're gonna match the opposite with this. So this side for me is a little bit higher. So I'm gonna kind of turn it so it's high side with low side and low side with high side. So then that way it'll even back out. And you're going to set it down on that layer. Make sure you turn your turntable and make sure that's centered on that last layer of cake. And then you're gonna push it down just a little bit just so that it locks into that last layer of cake. And then we're going to do our filling 2 more times. Now again, we're going to be putting the middle up. You always want the middle of the cake to be up. You're gonna set that on. Now the reason why you always want the middle up is a couple different reasons. First of all, when a cake cools, the top automatically wants to shrink. So the top of the cake is always going to be a little bit smaller than the bottom of the cake. So when you're doing the middle, you always have the same size of filling layer when you're doing it that way. Also, the bottom of the cake will be really moist. So if you're like the very last layer will crumb a lot. So that way you're not having to deal with it or touch it, anything like that. You just put it next to the filling. You don't have to worry about it. So you're going to always make sure you have like a little mini piping bag in your hand and do the filling. Make sure it's covered everywhere. Okay, the most important part is the top. You want to make sure this is the bottom of the cake. You don't want that to be up. You always want the middle of the cake to be the very top. That way you're not having to deal with any of that moist cake that will start to pull. So that's just building the cake. So now we're going to crumb coat our cake. So you can wipe off your spatula. You can have a bowl and scrape it off into here, or you can wipe it on your napkin, whichever you prefer. And now we're going to take that buttercream. We're going to do a loose spiral on top. Now you don't need a ton of buttercream. So we're not like doing a tight spiral like we were doing the filling. We don't want to have a ton of buttercream on this point. Then you're going to take your black spatula. Again, you're going to hold it between your thumb and your middle finger with your pointer finger on that rest. And we're just going to use the tip of the spatula again. You don't want it to be flat. Now, you're going to push hard on this. Your cake is frozen, so don't be afraid of your cake. You want to push it down side to side, back and forth like this. Once you have your buttercream like this, you're going to then kind of go in a flower pattern, petal pattern. You're going to be pushing that buttercream over the back of your cake. You don't want your spatula to be going over the back of your cake. You just want that buttercream to be going over the cake. And if you have a spot where it's a little bit bald, you can kind of pull some over from another part. But we're pushing that buttercream over the back. Once we have that done, if you put your spatula over the edge, it'll pull off that buttercream, and you don't want that. So that's why we're just, and you want to make sure you're going back and forth and kind of gliding off instead of going up. If you're going up, you're pulling that buttercream off of your cake. You don't want to do that. So you want to make sure you're just using the tip of the cake when you're doing that. Okay, I'm going to scrape that. Now we're going to do the side of the cake. Okay, so what you can do is if you have, I have a napkin here. I'm going to kind of push this so then that way it is not right next, because you can have your bag sitting on the counter like this. And again, if you're right-handed, it'll be on the right side. You want to hold the piping bag in between your hand like this. If you have a little bit of extra, you can turn the bag a little bit so that way the buttercream doesn't go up into the bag. You're going to turn the turntable counterclockwise. You're going to be on the right side. We're going to pipe a bead of buttercream right at the bottom where the cake meets the cake board, just like that. Then we're going to add beads of buttercream to the dams. Now, the reason why we're going to be doing that is because we want to use that excess buttercream as our crumb coat, and it's going to fill in any gaps that we have from where the dam meets the outside of the cake. So then that's filling in all those little gaps and spaces. So it's going to look something like that. Paper towels back in. From here, you're going to then use your black spatula, again holding it between your thumb and your middle finger with your pointer finger on that rest. And you're going to go, if you're right-handed, you're going to go up and over to the left side. If you're left-handed, you're going to go up and over to the right side. What we want to do is we want to make sure we have our elbow high. We don't want to lower our elbow. If you lower your elbow, this is going to want to lower, and you don't ever want to do this. You want to have straight edges, meaning straight up and down, straight side to side. You don't ever want to flatten this corner edge down. It will be something that you'll want to do because that just kind of feels right when you've never decorated cakes before. It's wrong, which is okay. You just have to get out of that habit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull and rock backwards. When you're pulling towards you, you're gonna be able to see the bottom of your spatula. You're gonna pull and then rock back. You don't wanna do little baby ones. This is gonna get you nowhere and do you no good. You don't wanna do big ones like this. That's counterproductive as well. So you're going to rock, pull and rock backwards. Pull and rock back. And you're pulling your buttercream. So you wanna be light enough that you're pulling the buttercream and not too heavy to where you're just pulling the crumbs on your cake. If you notice that your buttercream, you're not pulling buttercream and you're pulling more cake, add a little bit more buttercream. It doesn't need to be a ton. And all you have to do is get your cake covered like this. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be smooth or pretty, none of that. So once you get it to this point, we're gonna get our opaque scraper. And this is very flexible, okay? You're gonna have it, it's got 3 rounded edges and 1 pointy edge. If you're right-handed, it's going to be on the bottom left corner. If you're left-handed, it's gonna be on the bottom right corner. When you're doing this, you wanna make sure you've choked up on that scraper so that your fingers are close to the edge and your thumb is like this on the back. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be at a 45-degree angle or a little bit wider. You don't wanna be too close to the cake. If you're too close to the cake, it won't pull that buttercream off. It'll just start reapplying that buttercream. So you're going to be at a 45-degree angle or a little bit wider, and you wanna do a consistent turn of your turntable. This is going counterclockwise, and you don't wanna start and stop like this. If you do, you'll see these lines in your buttercream. You don't want it to look like that. If you're getting those lines, it means you're not doing a consistent turn of your turntable. So use that opposite hand to turn. Now I'm not pulling off a lot of buttercream, I'm just pulling off some of that excess, scraping it into the bowl. Now I did the bottom first, we're gonna go up to the top. And when we do that, you don't wanna be more than a 1/2 inch above your cake, and you never ever want this bottom part of your scraper to leave that side of the cake. If you leave that bottom part of your scraper off of the side of your cake, you will start rounding the top of your cake. And if you go further up, the more you're gonna wanna do this, and you don't want that. You wanna make sure it's parallel to the side of your cake. If the very top of your scraper isn't touching your cake, where you can kind of see that in some of mine, that's okay, that's okay. We are not gonna worry about that. You wanna just make sure that bottom part of your opaque scraper is not leaving the side of your cake. Okay, so I'm cleaning this off and making sure I clean that edge. We want this edge to be clean when we do the tops of the cakes. Now when we are pushing that buttercream over the edge, it's so that we can get these buttercream walls. These walls are very important to make nice straight edges, to make our cakes look like they're fondant covered when they're actually buttercream. What you're gonna do is start with the shortest wall, and then you're gonna put that at 8 o'clock. Now, it's when you're looking down at your cake, what is 8 o'clock? This is 12 and then goes around. So 8 o'clock is right here. It's in the front left corner of my cake. And no matter how I turn the cake, this is always going to be 8 o'clock, no matter how I turn it. So the reason why is you're gonna pull straight across. You don't wanna pull from the back, you will always round it. So you're pulling at 8 o'clock and you just take that edge and you're gonna be at a 45-degree angle and you just pull that wall down just a little bit, and then you'll scrape your scraper in your bowl. Clean that edge. Pull. We're not going all the way across the cake. We're just pulling that wall down. This doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because this is just that base crumb coat layer, and you don't have to have this to be absolutely perfect. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna take that and put it in the freezer. Now we got our cake out of the freezer. We let it sit in there for 5 minutes to get our crumb coat solidified and hardened up. That way we don't have to worry about the buttercreams mixing. And now we're gonna do our outer buttercream layer. This is gonna be the one that's nice and pretty and smooth. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start at the top. So you're gonna grab your buttercream bag between your thumb and your finger, just like that, to have a little mini piping bag in your hand. What you're gonna do is start with a tight spiral at the top. Again, you're wanting to hold it up and away from your cake. That way, we want this to be thick. We're gonna want this buttercream layer to be really thick because we'll be pulling some off. So what you're gonna do is you're going to start the tight spiral and then I stay on the right side of the cake and I'm turning the turntable clockwise. I'm just piping in a tight spiral. You want to make sure there are no gaps in your buttercream. If you have gaps in your buttercream, those will become air bubbles. So you want to make sure that you do not have those. You're going to go all the way around and then one more off of the edge, just like that. Then we're going to take our black spatula. We're going to be holding between our thumb and our middle finger with our pointer finger on the rest, right, just like that. We're going to put our tip of our spatula in the middle of the cake and we're going to have it tipped up towards us a little bit. We're going to hover just above the cake just so that we're just barely touching that buttercream. You want to make sure this is straight. You're not going down like this. That'll dome that buttercream. You want to make sure you're holding it nice and straight. You're just going to keep going around and around, just barely touching it to kind of flatten that down. Okay, and then you'll have that middle where it looks a little funky like that. Got a little hole in the middle. So what I'm going to do, as you can tell, I didn't pull off a lot of buttercream. We're not wanting to pull off a lot of buttercream. But what I'm going to do is scrape this into my bowl. And then I'm going to pick it back up with the bottom of my black spatula. And I'm going to just fill that little gap in and then do the same thing. Smooth it out just like that. We're going to go back around and do this again. So it doesn't have to be absolutely perfectly smooth. We just want to make sure that it's relatively smooth. Next, we're going to go on to the side. Again, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold it on the hanging off just like this. And I'm going to be turning the turntable counterclockwise. The first round, you want to pipe up and underneath that little lip, just like that. And then from there, you're going to pipe little beads around. Now, you want to make sure this is thick amount of buttercream. We're going to be using all the buttercream that's in our bag, so 5 cups total. You're going to go all the way around. Again, touching the last layer of buttercream that we have applied. You're just going to keep going around and around, making sure that you have a lot of buttercream on there. Now, we're going to be pulling buttercream off. That's why you want to apply so much. So you can tell right here, I did not touch the last layer of buttercream. So because I did not touch, I'm just going to go in and fill in that gap. If you do not fill in those gaps and you do not touch the last layer of buttercream that you applied, those will be air bubbles, just like at the top. We're just going down the cake. The best way to get that buttercream to stick to the side of your cake is to use a lot of hand pressure. You got to use quite a bit of hand pressure to be able to get that buttercream to stick to the side of the cake and to be able to get a lot of buttercream to come out of the tip of your bag. And if you have a little bit left, I just kind of go through and just apply a little bit here and there, but you do want to have just a tiny amount left over in your bag for this next stage. So I have a little bit left. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our opaque scraper. You have the 3 rounded edges and 1 pointy edge. That pointy edge is going to be where the cake meets the cake board. You're going to have your 4 fingers choked up onto that edge right here. And we're just using the edge. You don't want more than the edge to be touching that cake. You just want the edge to touch it. You're going to start on the widest part of your cake. We're going to be at a 45-degree angle or a little bit wider. And I am just touching the widest part, and I'm just slowly going in towards the center of the cake, just applying minimal amount of pressure every turn. And this is kind of both smoothing it out and applying it to the cake. I'm just gonna go in circles. You can tell I'm not pulling off a lot of buttercream. I'm just pulling off a little bit. And you kind of also want to push down on some of your turns to get that buttercream off of your board too. So I've started there, but then I'm also now going to go up to the top. I'm not going to be more than a 1/2 inch above the cake, and you want that bottom part to be touching. You always want to be parallel. So it's going to kind of look funny in some situations, but you're just going to keep going around and around, making sure that's parallel. You want to get that buttercream to stick to the side of the cake. Like that. And now, if you have a lot of these little crevices. So you can kind of see I have these little gaps in between on some of these parts. That's what we're going to use that buttercream that we have left over. We're just going to put those and fill in into the gaps that we have. Fill those little bad boys in. I'm going to go around again and just smooth that out just a little bit. This doesn't have to be perfect by any means because we're going to be putting this back in the freezer. So we're just kind of getting it smooth and smashed onto the cake. Now, I don't have walls all the way around this. So you can kind of see right here where it's lacking a wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the leftover of that buttercream and I'm going to put like a wall right here on the side. And then I'm also going to fill in on the top, just like that. So top and side. And then I'll just no more than a ½ inch, having that bottom part touching the side. So you can tell the bottom half is touching because you can see this line in that buttercream that I'm making, because I'm not letting that bottom part touch, like leave the side of the cake. It's always touching. So you can kind of see that line. Okay, and I'll just clean that line up a little bit, just using really super duper light pressure. You always want to use light pressure in this stage. We're not using heavy pressure that will be pulling all your buttercream off, and that's not what you want. So you can kind of tell this is the amount of buttercream that I took off just in that stage. So it's not a ton, it is about 1/3 cup. It's super light. Now we're going to go take this and put it back in the freezer for 15 minutes. So now we've pulled our cake out of the freezer. It's been in there for 15 minutes. You can also do 15 to 20. It's all going to depend on your freezer and how what the temperature is and how fast it'll get your buttercream cold. You want it to be hard, so you can't really push it. You want it hard to the touch. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna take your metal scraper now, and you want your fingers down at the bottom of the metal scraper. You want them to be kind of spread wide. The whole purpose of the metal scraper is to make your buttercream even, straight up and down. That's the only purpose. We will smooth it out in the next step. So the big purpose is to make sure it's even, straight up and down. Now, you're going to kind of want to test your buttercream. If it's really, really cold, you're going to have to use quite a bit of pressure. If it's not that cold, you're not going to have to use a ton of pressure. So you're going to be at a 45 or 90 to 45 degree angle. You don't want to go closer, because if you start going closer, you'll reapply whatever buttercream you had on that scraper back onto the cakes, and that's not what you want. So you're going to be more of a 90 degree, and you're going to kind of glide off the cake. We don't want to start and stop like this. That's not what we want to do. You want to kind of glide off the cake, and you want to make sure that this scraper is firmly on the bottom of your cake board, because that will make sure that it's straight up and down. So we're just going to be applying pressure, and I'm more of a 90 degree angle than I am at a 45. I'm just going around the cake. Now you can see I had more buttercream at the bottom than I did at the top or the middle, and so that's what's making it even, pulling off the excess. You're just going to take your black spatula and scoop that into the bowl. Clean off your scraper. You don't want to pull off too much. You're just kind of making sure you pull off that to get it straight, even up and down. Now, if you find that you're pulling off quite a bit of buttercream and you're still not getting it perfectly straight, say that you have the top is still kind of looks like a skirt, so it's skirting out to where the bottom is wider than the top is. If it is that way, then what you have to do is just take your cold buttercream and you're going to just reapply it to the side, just like that. You're going to apply that buttercream just so that way you can get it to where it's even, straight up and down. You can also fill any holes or gaps that you have going around the cake with that cold buttercream with your black spatula. So now we're even, straight up and down. What we're going to do is we're going to take our black spatula, again holding it between your thumb and your middle finger with your pointer finger on the rest. Just like before, you're going to have it at a slight angle, just like this at the top. And we're going to go around. Now, it's going to be hard to pull in some spots, and that's okay. So it's going to look a little rough at first, but we're pulling off those walls. Now it might sound counterproductive, trust the process. So we're just going around. Now if you can kind of see the top of your cake in some spots, you can either reapply more buttercream, put it back in the freezer, kind of do that step again, or it's really going to depend on how you're going to be decorating your cake. If you can cover it up, that's the best part about decorating the cake, is that if you have small mess ups here and there, we're going to be applying sprinkles to the bottom of this cake. So if the bottom you can't get perfectly perfect to what you want it to be, that's okay. We're going to cover it up with sprinkles. We're also going to be applying sprinkles randomly on here, so if you have a random mess up, you can cover it with a sprinkle. As the same with the top, we're going to be applying a quarter of this is going to have ganache on it. So if you can see just a part of your cake at the top, that's okay. You can cover it up with the ganache. So we're just kind of doing what we did before and going around. We're just using just a little bit of pressure this time. Now, if you find that it's doming, you can just kind of scrape a little bit like this. Just scrape it, and then you can go back around just like that. Okay, so now that we did that, we've got like this buttercream over the edge. That's perfect. We're gonna take our opaque scraper, no more than a ½ inch above. You always want the bottom half touching the side of the cake, and you're just gonna use really light pressure and go around. Okay, that's gonna build those walls again, but now those walls are soft. But the top of the buttercream is cold still, and the side of the buttercream is cold still. If your buttercream, if it's taken you a long time to get it to this point, throw it back in the freezer. That's okay. If you need to keep throwing it back in the freezer and bringing it back out, that's totally fine. As long as that is the only thing that's you don't want your buttercream to be too warm. Because if your buttercream is too warm, you're just gonna keep making mistakes and you're gonna get incredibly frustrated. So if your buttercream starts getting too soft, throw it back in the fridge, throw it in the freezer. So either one. So when you have the mistakes on here and you want to smooth it out so you can kind of see I have a line right here, we're going to take that opaque scraper and you're going to use light to medium pressure, and you're just going to go around. I'm at a 45 to 50 degree angle and I'm just going around that cake, and that is getting all those imperfections. Again, don't start and stop. You want to make sure you're doing a smooth glide all the way around, that the turntable's not stopping. Okay, now for our next stage, you want to make sure you have a clean portion of your bowl, and then you want a clean paper towel. Those are the two things you need. Wipe off your opaque scraper on your paper towel, get it nice and clean, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take your finger and go on the edge just like that. Now we're going to break those walls down. You're going to find the shortest wall, and from there at 8 o'clock, remember, it looks like the face of the clock. Noon, 6, I should say 12, not 12, 6 towards you, 9, and 3. And again, those are always going to stay no matter where your cake turns. You're going to have 6 is always going to be right here. So we want to be at 8 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock when we're doing this. Okay, and I'm going to have I'm just going to be at a 45 degree angle tilt with my opaque scraper and just pull that wall down. I am using such little pressure because that buttercream is soft. But what's nice is that the top and the sides are still cold. So this is super easy to pull down. So you don't have to use a lot of pressure. You want to go straight across, not all the way across the cake. So we do cake, paper towel, or you can do cake, bowl, paper towel, finger. Just depending on how much buttercream you have on your scraper. So cake, bowl, paper towel, finger. The reason why you always want to put your finger like this and clean off that edge is because even when you scrape it on your paper towel, you'll have little specks of buttercream left on your opaque scraper, and those will get reapplied to the edge of your buttercream, and you won't have nice crisp edges like what you're going for. Just gonna get those walls down, and then that's it. And then we're on to the decorating portion, which is the best part. Now we get to do the fun part, which is decorating. So I did put this back in the freezer for 5 minutes. Now you want to make sure that the buttercream is a little harder when you're doing this, because if you don't and your buttercream is soft, you're going to stick those sprinkles too far into the buttercream and it's going to be a giant mess. So you want to make sure you have like a cookie sheet like this that has lips on it. And that way it kind of conceals those sprinkles. I'm using a glove just because that's habit for us. But you just can use a glove on your dominant hand. You don't have to use a glove at all. Who cares? Germs are germs. So what you're going to do is you're going to take these sprinkles. I have them in a bowl because they're easier to grab. So you're just going to take a little bit of sprinkles in your hand, like that. And you're going to set your hand onto the base of the cake board. And you're going to set your hand onto the cake. Now I'm applying a little bit of pressure, and then you just put your hand away and get more sprinkles. And you're just going to keep going around like this. Now I do about 3, and then I've got all these sprinkles on the edge. So I take my pinky and I run it across the edge, and then I'll scoop up. I'll pull those sprinkles up my cake a little bit. Now this doesn't have to be the same size all the way around. You can have little hills and valleys. You do you, boo. This is your artistic freedom coming to life onto the cake. So that's the best part about decorating the cake, is you can just do whatever you want. And it's your creation. Or you can be a perfectionist like me and make sure it's to the T. Either one. It's on you. Okay, so now that I've gone all the way around, I just kind of check if I have any gaps here and there. And then once I've done that, I just take my pinky finger and I go around the base of the cake board, kind of scoop off the excess sprinkles. And once I've got most of those sprinkles off, I then kind of make a spot. If you're having a hard time getting your fingers underneath your cake board, just grab a black spatula and kind of stick it underneath there to help you lift it up. Then I kind of hold it at a little bit of an angle. I tap the board, and then I'll shoo some of those sprinkles off. Just go around. There you go. And now you've got your sprinkles done. And we'll move on to the ganache. Now for the ganache, I'm actually going to go stick this into the freezer for another 5-ish minutes. That way, you want your buttercream to be really cold when you apply the ganache. The reason for that is that ganache is chocolate, obviously, and you don't want it to drip all the way down to your cake board. And so in order to keep it from not dripping all the way down to your cake board, you want your buttercream to be cold. So I'm just going to go pop that in the freezer for 5 minutes. So now while we have that cake in the freezer, we're going to make the ganache for it. So then that way that buttercream is nice and cold. So what I did is I put some nice little chocolate melts in there, and you're going to heat it up in the microwave. You put it in there for a minute first, and then you're going to see where it's at. Water ganache is pretty awesome because you can just make this super easily, and it's shelf stable, so you don't have to keep it refrigerated. I'm kind of chopping up some of that chocolate that's still solid. You don't want to overheat it, so if you still have some chunks of chocolate in there, that's fine. You just want to keep stirring until you get no chocolate chunks. No, it's surprising. If you find that you still have like a couple little baby chunks here and there, you can heat it back up, but only do it in like 5 to 10 second intervals. Really, you don't want to overheat it. If you overheat it, it'll be a giant block. So while you're on film, I'm going to pop this in the microwave for literally 5 seconds. Okay, so now that it is nice and melted, I'm going to add hot water. Now the ratios will be on the page, but it's 12 ounces of chocolate to 2 ounces of hot water. And now I'm going to have my gorgeous camera girl pan in. So you can see that it looks really broken. It doesn't look right. Just trust the process. Trust me, I promise it'll look good. So I just use a spatula at first to kind of get some of that worked in. Right to the sides. And then I get my handy dandy whisk and you whisk away. And now it's a nice pretty ganache. Okay. So then I'm going to put it into a bag. This is the best way to fill any of your stuff. You just have a piping bag and a cup, and you just put it in there and fold the top over. So I'm going to dump my ganache in there. And then we're going to close it up. So how you close up a bag is you just kind of flatten that out. You're going to fold the top over so it looks like a little loop. And then depending on how much of a tail you have, I'll sometimes fold it over again so it looks like this. And I take my rubber band, I hold it, and then double it. So you got two. So that way it doesn't take that long to put this on. Okay, just like that. And then you're going to push that ganache down to the bottom of the bag. You're going to just cut a little part of the tip of the bag off. And then we're going to go get our cake from the freezer. So what we're going to do is do the ganache now. We got the side sprinkles. We just took this out of the freezer. The buttercream is cold. So now you're going to take a toothpick, and what you're going to do is find where you want to put the ganache. Now, previously I said I have a little bit of the cake top that you can kind of see through the buttercream. So I'm going to kind of do it in that area. And you're going to do a big pizza slice, like a quarter. If you want to do more, you can do more. I'm just doing a quarter. So you do like a nice little quarter slice, and you're going to take your cake pop and put it in the middle of your cake, like that. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your ganache. You're going to squeeze this. So you want your bag in between your thumb and your finger like this. And you're going to be pulling on that tail of the bag. You're going to squeeze this. You're going to go all the way around. And then you'll have some gaps and stuff. So you'll hold this on the side and squeeze all the way around. Okay. Now, when we're putting our ganache on the side of our cake, you want to make sure you're pushing it over the edge of the cake and not pushing it on top. So I'm not going from the outside on, I'm going from the top off. So we made those lines. Those are just kind of general statements of where we're going to be. So then that way we know. So I'm going to first do this line, and then now I'm going to push that ganache over the edge. So you can kind of see how far it goes. And then I'm going to do the opposite one. Push it over the edge. So you can see I'm over the top of the cake, not off the edge going in. And then you're going to squeeze your ganache and kind of fill in these gaps. You want to make sure you're moving quickly because you don't want your ganache to get too cold, then it doesn't come together nicely. So now you have it like this. What you're going to do is start here. You're going to squeeze one, then fill. 1, 2, 3. If I'm not counting, I'm not squeezing. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. And I'm filling in the white space in between. So you're not wanting to just continually squeeze and move. And you want to make sure you're doing different time intervals so that your drips are longer. Okay, so now it looks like this. And from here, you're going to then go back to the top and squeeze again and do a second coat of ganache. So I'm starting at the top, going around. Okay, and then go into the side and fill in any gaps that you have. That way it looks like melted chocolate. Melted chocolate. It is melted chocolate. It looks like ice cream melted on top of ice cream. So it looks like that. It's pretty cute. Then you'll just throw away your ganache. You don't need that anymore. Now what we're going to do is take our wonderful ice cream cone. Now what I did is I dipped this into chocolate and then dipped it into the same sprinkles that we put on the side. You don't have to do that. You can just dip it in chocolate. You can dip it in different sprinkles. You do you. Okay, so now I'm going to take it, and you don't want to go too far on this side because it will fall off. So you want to kind of be on the top, part on top, part on the side, but you also want to find where you want the front to be. Now for me, the front is going to be where the first strip is. So this is the front of the cake for me. So I go there, so then that way I know where I want the cone to be. And you're going to press that down a little bit. You don't want to be too crazy with it because you'll kind of squish up the ganache. So see, that's what the front of it looks like. So then from there, we're going to grab our buttercream. We've got a little extra bag of buttercream. We're going to add our little fun, cute extras. So you're going to take your macaron. You can buy a macaron from the grocery store, just kind of anywhere. You can buy frozen macarons to also serve at your party. You do whatever, you know, wherever you want to. You want to make your own macarons? Good for you. What a boss, because they're tough. So I'm going to take some of my buttercream. I'm going to do a dollop on my macaron. And I'm going to put it just to the left of the front of the cake. So this is the front. So I'm just putting it just to the left. Okay, and then I'm going to take one of my chocolates and I'm going to apply just a line of buttercream. You can see just that line. And I'm going to have this diagonally above the there. And then on the next one, you want to do a small built up side. So it's got a nice little depth to it because this is going to have to touch the cake, but you'll also have like the other little chocolate. So there'll be a little bit of a gap. So you want to make sure that you will fill that gap. And that one just goes straight up and down, right underneath the other one that is to the side. So now we've gotten this far. Now I get to put the little sprinkles on. You can get these online. You can get them at Michael's has some. Honestly, just if you don't want to even put these on, you want to just do this, that's great too. So I kind of dump them out and then I will put them on the cake in a random order. Now I find that sometimes this is the hardest part, right? Because everybody likes things to be perfect, right? But you don't want these to be perfectly even or symmetrical, and you want it to be in a random order. So it's always like, oh, what's my next color? So it can be a little difficult sometimes. Okay, so now we've got all our sprinkles on there and you are all done. I mean, I love this cake personally. This is one of my favorites. This is a cake that I did with a bunch of customers just this June, and they loved it. So now you get to show off your wonderful cake to all your family and friends. Good job. You are amazing. And I hope you enjoyed this class.